You pick up the phone, meaning to hang up, but end up saying yes instead. It's a small thing, easy to explain away, yet your stomach tightens as if it already knows. That's how it begins, not with a threat, but with warmth that overreaches. The person on the other end sounds calm, kind, and oddly focused on you. They ask more than they share, and you find yourself talking longer than you planned. They don't push, they guide. They echo your words back just enough to sound understanding. The tone feels safe, like someone finally paying attention after a long wait. That's the trap. The danger hides inside the comfort, folded into the rhythm of approval. It can feel like being seen for the first time. In plain terms, manipulation doesn't announce itself, it studies you. The power lies in how quietly it does the work. You might notice how they test your edges early on, what you'll laugh at, what you'll excuse, what makes you open up faster. They're learning your rhythm while appearing patient. That's what makes it disorienting. What looks like care is often reconnaissance. It's the paradox of control disguised as connection. Said directly, the moment you feel safest with someone you barely know may be the moment you're being sized up. You've felt how the warmth can pull you in before you realize it's directional. Now comes the quiet part, how control hides in kindness. Manipulation rarely starts with lies. It starts with agreements. They nod, listen, and phrase things so you'll keep explaining yourself. Each small yes you offer seems harmless, but together they start bending your choices. You still feel in charge, yet your decisions now pass through their invisible filter of praise or disapproval. They build the exchange like an art form, each gesture rewarding compliance. A compliment after you concede, a sigh when you resist. Over time, you stop noticing the pattern. What felt like chemistry becomes choreography. It can look like harmony, two people in sync, one leading just enough to make the other relax. It's not connection, it's conditioning. You learn to anticipate their reactions, to pre-edit yourself for peace. The cost hides in the relief. Self-doubt is the quiet proof that the trade is working. You replay moments in your head, checking if you were too blunt, too distant, too demanding. Meanwhile, their calm steadiness makes you feel like the one who's off balance. That's the genius of invisible control. It convinces you the imbalance is your fault. Watch the sequence in real time. They charm, you open, they tighten. Then they soften and you stay. It doesn't look like control because it never needs to raise its voice. The most effective manipulation isn't force, it's consent rehearsed in advance. By the time you notice the pattern, you've already started editing your own instincts to protect the bond. And that's when autonomy slips quietly into approval's shadow. You already know the feeling of being seen too quickly. Someone new seems to understand you without needing the backstory. It feels uncanny but flattering. This is where the soft hook begins, not in what they tell you, but in what they notice. They start with small calibrations. A pause when you mention your family. A quiet nod when you downplay your exhaustion. Each reaction is a test balloon, tracking what draws you closer and what makes you retreat. They don't rush, they gather. Within a few minutes, they know whether approval, sympathy, or admiration is the key that opens you fastest. They mirror what you value most. If you pride yourself on patience, they'll seem endlessly considerate. If you crave honesty, they'll confess something no one else knows. The aim isn't to deceive outright, it's to blend so seamlessly that you lower your guard. It's like watching someone trace a map you didn't know was visible. To spell it out, They're reading your emotional GPS, your needs, guilt, empathy, and plotting where the leverage sits. A manipulator doesn't attack what's strong, they court what's generous. They look for the impulse that makes you overextend yourself. They'll frame their vulnerability as something you can help fix, and you'll feel useful in the process. That's how the hook stays soft. It feels like care, not capture. They may say, "I've never met anyone who listens like you," or "You make it easy to talk." Each line lands as appreciation, but it's also data collection. Before long, you find yourself disclosing more, explaining more, trying to live up to the image they've painted. That's the quiet turn, when being understood starts costing something. What feels like deep connection is often reconnaissance dressed as intimacy. And the more they know, the less you can move freely without worrying what it will cost to disappoint them. Here's what happens when the pull starts feeling like home. You're cared for, noticed, even comforted. And yet, something small inside you keeps tensing. The contradiction doesn't make sense at first. They check in often, praise your loyalty, remember your preferences. Everything looks right on paper. But the comfort has edges. You begin hesitating before speaking, weighing how your tone might land. You edit stories so they won't worry or worse, withdraw. It's not fear exactly, it's management. You're keeping the peace inside what looks like affection. They don't forbid you from leaving, they simply make absence feel like betrayal. If you take a night for yourself, you sense the air cool. A gentle "I just missed you" arrives, soft but loaded. You rush to reassure them, relieved when their mood lifts again. That relief becomes the reward loop, tightening quietly over time. It's a warm cage, made of care, held together by the fear of losing it. In simple terms, control feels like protection until you realize you're earning your safety. You tell yourself it's mutual, that they just love deeply, that you're both intense. But the balance keeps shifting. Your world begins centering around how they're feeling, what they might need, what might set them off. Sometimes you catch the contradiction head on. You're comforted and cornered in the same breath. The affection is real enough to keep you hoping. The unease is real enough to keep you quiet. That's the emotional architecture of manipulation. Nothing overtly cruel, nothing you can point to cleanly. Just a steady trade, your freedom for their calm. It's not confusion that traps you. It's the kindness that comes with strings you're too careful to tug. Notice how the charm and the control seem like opposite traits. One open, one closed, but together they form a loop. The same traits that drew you in early on are the ones that now hold you still. At first, their attention feels electric. They finish your sentences, recall your words, sense your moods before you name them. You tell yourself, finally, someone who gets it. You don't see yet that what feels like deep recognition is actually replication. They're reflecting you back with precision, not meeting you in truth. It's a performance of resonance. When you're tired, they lower their voice. When you're decisive, they admire your strength. The goal isn't to match you, it's to merge. The closer they seem, the more you relax because sameness feels like safety. They use that illusion to rearrange your sense of what's real. You start measuring your worth by how well they respond. Their moods become your compass. A compliment steadies you, a silence unravels you. In plain terms, you stop trusting your own reflection because theirs feels clearer. When the tension finally shows, when something doesn't add up, They frame your doubt as sensitivity. They might say, "You're overthinking again," or "You always assume the worst." You pause, trying to stay fair. After all, they once felt so attuned. You want to believe that version is still there. That's how the early tenderness keeps you from naming the later manipulation. The mind wants coherence. The heart wants to keep the story that started with connection. That's the conflict that keeps people stuck. When it clicks, you stop chasing it. You begin to see that their empathy was never shared, it was borrowed. You start hearing the timing behind their kindness, the pause before their reassurance. You notice how each moment of understanding keeps you orbiting them a little longer. The metaphor breaks here. It's not a mirror at all. It's a surface designed to echo only you, until you forget there's someone else standing there. Recognition was never the proof of safety, it was the bait. And once you see that, the silence between you starts sounding different. It's not emptiness, it's space returning, space that was always yours but had been made to feel borrowed. At first it feels like freedom. You spot the pattern, you name the game, and then the crash comes. Seeing clearly doesn't feel like victory, it feels like loss. You replay old moments, hearing them again with new ears. The late-night talks that once felt sacred now sound strategic. Every detail, the well-timed text, the patient silences, the way they remembered your smallest stories, turns from comfort into evidence. You start questioning your own judgment, wondering how you could have missed it for so long. Grief sits beside shame. You weren't just deceived, you participated. You shared, explained, defended. You believed the warmth because you needed it to be real. Seeing clearly cost the illusion of safety you built around their care. Even simple memories feel contaminated. You think about the first compliment, the first time they asked if you'd eaten, the nights they said they understood you better than anyone. Each recollection now carries a faint static, as if the tape's been tampered with. It's disorienting to realize that affection doubled as observation. You start doubting everyone's motives, even your own. The world tilts towards suspicion, and trust feels reckless. The grief deepens because the care did soothe you. Their words helped. Their presence steadied. That part was real, and that's what makes it hard to let go. You weren't foolish for needing it. You were human for believing comfort could stand without a price. In plain terms, the cost of seeing clearly is mourning the version of yourself who didn't know better. And yet, that mourning is proof you've begun returning to yourself, the self that can tell warmth from watching. At first it seems like everything has to change, every instinct, every habit of openness. But recovery starts smaller than that. It begins with the pause. You stop explaining yourself mid-sentence. You notice when your chest tightens before you agree to something. You take that moment as information, not overreaction. The pause becomes practice. You learn to let silence stand without rushing to fill it. When someone new asks too many questions too soon, you don't match their energy. You listen instead. That stillness feels awkward at first, but it's where you start separating interest from intrusion. You might test it in low stakes, declining a favor, not replying right away, changing your mind without apology. These are small acts, but they mark the shift from being read to being real. You start trusting signals instead of stories. Some days you'll overcorrect, pulling back too far. That's part of recalibration. The goal isn't to distrust everyone. It's to recognize the difference between attention that soothes and attention that monitors. Over time, neutrality replaces vigilance. You no longer scan conversations for danger or reassurance. You just listen. And when someone's warmth lands clean, without the undertow of obligation, you feel the difference immediately. This isn't about never being fooled again. It's about building a self that can stand even if you are. In plain terms, recovery isn't a performance of strength. It's the quiet decision to stop confusing being understood with being safe. You begin moving through the world without needing to be fully known to feel at ease. That's the point where autonomy and trust finally start to share the same ground. You've watched how warmth can turn to leverage, how care can disguise control. The early glow that once felt like safety became a signal of danger, and it left you wondering if trust itself is risky. But protection doesn't come from constant scanning, it comes from steadiness. Real clarity feels calm. You start noticing what's said and what isn't, without rushing to interpret it. When someone praises you, you don't lean forward. When they withdraw, you don't chase. You stay centered long enough to tell whether the moment is mutual or managed. Said plainly, the power you wanted from vigilance returns as quiet self-trust. This kind of seeing isn't suspicion, it's attention without fear. You can register someone's patterns without rewriting yourself around them. Their approval or silence no longer dictates your position. It's the same look that once searched for danger, now repurposed toward understanding. You stop guarding against people and start recognizing your own boundaries in real time. That's the final turn, when awareness no longer feels like alertness, but balance. You can meet connection as it is, unarmed and awake, and the world, finally, stops feeling like something you must read before it reads you. You've traced the full pattern, from charm to control, from confusion to clarity. What's left isn't closure, it's continuation. Boundaries aren't walls you set once, they're living edges that shift with what you learn. Each day you test them in small, ordinary ways, by pausing before you answer, by naming what you need, by letting quiet moments stay quiet. This is how trust returns, not through certainty, but through repetition. Self-trust grows when you act on what you notice, not just what you hope. And though the story feels singular, it never is. Everyone rebuilding after manipulation moves through this same uneven ground, grieving, recalibrating, learning to look again without flinching. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to stay honest with what feels true. If this reflection helped you find language for something you've lived, share it with someone who might need that same steadiness. Connection begins again from there. Thank you for watching.